So let's dive right into the Christianity part of it. I talked a little bit about how most Christians tend to be very good people, and I treasure that. I think they're one of the major groups that is trying to bring ethics into the world. However, when you go to the fundamentalist core of any of these religions, you run up against things like, if you want to get to heaven rather than burn in hell for eternity, you need to accept this guy who supposedly lived 2,000 years ago. You need to accept him as your Lord and Savior. Otherwise, you don't stand a chance. So that's pretty threatening speech, particularly based on some dogma that wasn't even written down for 65 years after Christ's supposed death. 65 years. In that era, that was like 3 generations. There were a lot of people writing down stuff in those days. Why weren't they writing down the Gospels and all of this wonderful philosophy and everything? Why weren't they writing that down for 65 years? And then I think it was, like 200 years later, they get together, the Christian leaders get together with this Council of Nicaea, and they decide to ban reincarnation. No, I guess it's pre-birth they banned so that they would have complete leverage. They didn't want to have reincarnation. They wanted to have heaven or hell only in order to have that political threat. So it's an intense thing. And frankly, for all my love and respect for Charlie Kirk, I think he was really caught in that shallow polemic. And I think that Candace Owens is also. And there's more and more of a movement amongst a number of them. Charlie Kirk is more of a strict Protestant. He hasn't gone to Catholicism. The Catholics are more rigid on all of that, having to believe literally the word of the Bible. Now, of course, there's, a whole new Bible created by the Rothschilds that most of the Christian Zionists are reading, the Schofield Bible. I won't go into the history of it, but check that out. The Rothschilds had it created to shape to their political agenda. And most of my Christian Zionist friends, they know about that it's called Schofield, but they don't know any of the history of it. So anyway, so Charlie's there for the most part being very morally coherent. But when it comes to someone marrying someone of the same sex, he admits that he says, okay, you do what you want, but yes, I don't believe you'll get into heaven. And there's all this threat. And so for me, part of the interest was, okay, Charlie, what's your moral foundation? Show me the coherence of the source of your universal morality. Well, for him and for Candace, it's the Bible. Literally, it's the Bible. So to me, that's a very shaky source. I would rather go for direct human experience, particularly when combined with science. And that's why I've been so obsessed with the universal morality for at least the last 20 years of my life. Because I think all of humanity is desperate for a universal morality, not desperate for someone to tell us what we have to do, but instead a universal morality that makes it very clear what we cannot do without violating other people. Then you're free to do whatever you want, as long as you don't violate other people. So let me share another slide with you, because let's actually go to the Bible and look at this basic morality a little bit. Because there was an interesting conversation with Tucker Carlson and Michael Knowles recently, where they were really talking about, okay, well, what's the source of ethics? And they're both really smart, really informed guys. And they couldn't come up with anything better than the Bible. And then Joe Rogan was in conversation with somebody else. I can't remember who it was. And, I can't remember for sure. Might have been Michael Schellenberger. And they were saying, okay, well, let's stop and take a look. What can we base our ethics on? And the other person, might have been Michael Knowles also, was saying, well, we've got it right there in the 10 Commandments. And Joe was good. He said, well, obviously the 10 Commandments probably got some good stuff there, But, what about the commandments of Judaism? And what about the commandments of Islam and all of the other world religions? What about Buddhism and Hinduism and so forth? If you just do your commandments, then you're imposing on everyone else. So I went to, okay, let's get a slide up of the 10 Commandments. Okay, the 10 Commandments. Someone's even done us the favor of putting them on some stone tablets. And this apparently is the font that God actually used on these tablets. He spoke English, used punctuation. So to give these to Moses, I'm kidding about this part, but they've gone to great lengths to try to make it look like this was directly the word of God. But let's just take a fresh cut. If we wanted to align with the non-aggression principle as a universal morality, how does the 10 Commandments do? Well, it starts right out with, I am the Lord your God. You shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. So this is coming from somebody who claims to be God and says, if you worship anybody else and serve anybody else, you're in trouble. So the first one doesn't really hold up unless you happen to be a fundamentalist Christian. And then you can take solace and, oh, God's on my side. That's good. Let's go to number 2. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. So there's some assumptions here. There's the Lord, and then there's your God. So if you don't believe in Jesus and you don't believe in the Christian God, ye shall not do that. So you better do that or else. Okay, let's go on to number 3. Remember to keep holy the Sabbath day. What's Sabbath day? Oh, the one delineated by the Bible that was written 3 generations later and then changed numerous times by the politicians to keep this. You have to keep the Sabbath day or else you're in trouble. So the first 3 don't really hold up. Honor your father and mother. Maybe that's got some value. I think I had a debate with, actually a really friendly, useful discussion with a very close friend recently, and we were talking about this one. And I said, I don't necessarily assume that. I think honor is something that has to be earned. And this person said, no, listen, it's right there in the Bible. Honor your father and mother. And I said, well, then let's break it out. What does honor mean? What's your definition of honor? Well, treat with respect. And I said, okay, well, what if they're sexually abusing you or beating you when they get drunk at night? Should you be respecting them? Should you be trusting them? And if not, then should you be honoring them? So I think this gets useful where we break it out philosophically and go, okay, honor your father and mother. I think to recognize a gratitude to your father and mother for bringing you into the world is very useful. You can't command people to do it, but I think it's a useful value. If your father and mother, or either one of them, spent a significant portion of their life putting food on the table for you and protecting you from the world, yeah, that's worthy of a lot of gratitude also. But trusting them or complying to them if they're abusive, that's another category. Okay, let's go on to number 5. You shall not kill. Sounds good. But again, I wish God had taken more time to have a few subsets in some of these commandments. You shall not kill. Well, what if someone is raping your child? What if a gang is and you happen to have a gun? Can you stop it? What if you're being raped by a much bigger, stronger guy? Can you injure them or kill them to stop it? What if somebody is invading your house with weapons? Can you protect your children? Can you injure or kill in the process? So again, it's time for an update. I'm suspicious of the sources on all this, but it needs to be better done. We need a new Declaration of Independence and a new set of commandments. So you shall not commit adultery. Again, if you're in an open marriage and you have an agreement that you like to swing with other couples or something like that, it may not be your thing, but for someone else, if that's their thing and they're all doing it as adults without violating anyone against their will, then okay, you shall not steal. Now that's probably the best one, in my opinion, on the whole set of tablets here, because the non-aggression principle always comes back to theft. You're stealing their property. You're stealing their right to speak. You're stealing their life. You're stealing their body. You're stealing their money, whatever it is. So I think number 7 is the great one. In fact, I would suggest that simply become the non-aggression principle spelled out, and then you get rid of all the others because that will be the source of all the ones we need without getting into all of these confusion between values, which you can encourage but not enforce, and ethics, which you can actually use force to defend. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Okay, I saw this one and I thought, okay, I better look up covet. So I looked up covet, and covet is to yearn to possess. Number 10 there, you shall not covet your neighbor's goods. So this is basically lusting after your neighbor's wife. You think she's hot, or you're jealous of what your neighbor's got. Well, good luck with that one. If you were going to put to death everyone who's turned on to their neighbor's wife or wishes they had more of their neighbor's stuff, you're in big trouble. You're in a giant religious war worldwide. Once again, if we break it down, it's like, yeah, we all tend to have these natural sexual attractions and envy or inspiration or whatever through other people's stuff. The key is you don't take it. You don't take their wife. You don't take their stuff. So that goes back to number 7, which has now become the non-aggression principle.